And hey, everybody, we're back. This is Dear World Christian, and my name is Jason. I want to thank you all so much for stopping by on this evening. Tonight, I am going to be interviewing Chad Jackson, who is the director of the movie Uncle Tom 2. And saw the movie last week, had an interview with Virgil Walker pertaining to it, and I was just blown away. I said, this movie is fantastic. And being the fact that I got an opportunity to speak with Chad, I said, I would love to have you on the show. So we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but that will be resolved in a moment. So I'm hoping to have him on very quick so I can interview him and give you all an opportunity as well to kind of ask him some questions. Whether you've seen the movie or no, I believe that you'll get a lot from just hearing his testimony as well as his story. So just looking through the live chat, I want to thank you all so much for stopping by. It looks like quite a few of you have already stopped by. It looks like a little bit of family reunion going on there. So I appreciate you very much. I'm going to just hit this message back real quick. Mr. Jackson, you didn't have to dress up to do this, man. Come on, I'm feeling underdressed, man. Can't come on my show and make me feel underdressed, man. Come on. What is going on here? How's it going today?
It's going very well. How are you?
No complaints at all. No complaints
Good.
At all, my friend. Well, I want to give you a chance to get settled in. We were just kind of doing what I call it and ask me a lot of things while we were waiting for you to come on in and give you a chance to get settled. So I think I got most of my questions taken care of. So we'll come back to those and we'll stop our AMA and give you a chance, Chad, to kind of, I had one question for you, then the rest was going to be up to you. I was going to say, Who in the world is Chad Jackson? Who's Chad?
That's a very good question. I am an entrepreneur here in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
I'm also, I guess I'm a film researcher now. We just
see.
released Uncle Tom 2. Yep. Just released Uncle Tom 2. We got some other films up our sleeve that we're excited about. Just a family man. I got 4 kids. I've been married to my wife for 10 years. Mm-hmm. We live in Cedar Hill. We worship here at a PCA Presbyterian church.
Come on, Presbys Unite. I finally got it, brother. I finally got another Presbyterian. I was like, man, he's about to tell me he's a Baptist. He's about to tell me he's a Baptist. Yes, and he's PCA. Come on, man.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, not a whole lot of interesting things about me, but, just doing my part.
No. I find you extremely interesting because you say that you're a movie researcher and the such like that, which I agree. Like, man, but can you just tell us a little bit about what your role was in the Uncle Tom movies? Like, what is your role so people can kind of gain like, oh, you're the reason why XYZ.
Yeah. So basically, for those who aren't familiar, there's Uncle Tom, which was released in 2020. And then there's Uncle Tom 2, which was released last month. Mm-hmm. And so basically, my story starts where, when I was 25, 26 years old, I started a small plumbing company and was able to grow that company. At the same time, I was very active in the Dallas County Republican Party. And, I was kind of disillusioned by some things that the party was doing. I didn't really agree with some of their tactics with the way that they were getting their messaging out. And so I just kind of resolved to just focus on growing my company and focusing on my family. But, a lot of the people that were involved with the Dallas County Republican Party still knew who I was. And so Justin Malone, who's the director of Uncle Tom, got the bright idea to write or to do a movie about Black conservatives. And so he wanted to start where he was. And so he went to the Dallas County Republican Party and said, hey, what Black folks do you have who are with the party? And somehow or another, he got my name. They called me and asked me if I were interested in sitting down for an interview. And so I agreed to it. I sat down. They were able to take that footage to Larry Elder in California. Larry liked what he saw, and so he agreed to become an executive producer for the film and was able to connect Justin with some other more prominent Black conservatives around the country, folks like Candace Owen, Herman Cain, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, Brandon Tatum, and others. And so Justin was able to release that film along with Larry Elder, who had a lot of say at the writing table, so on and so
Oh
forth.
yeah.
And so Uncle Tom was released, and literally my role in it was just being interviewed for it. After the success of that, Justin and I hit it off, and he saw something in me. I saw something in him. He asked me if I would be interested in coming on board, perhaps to do a sequel to the film, and I agreed to. And so I downsized my company and went all in with Malone Pictures, and together we did Uncle Tom 2. Now, for me, as far as being a researcher goes, it's one of those things that isn't, I didn't go to college specifically to be a researcher.
Correct.
It's just something that, naturally, that I'm naturally into. If a subject piques my curiosity, I'm going to look into that subject. I'm going to do a deep dive into it and pretty much obsess over it. And so that's the extent to which I'm a researcher. And so it's just something that came natural. I love spending these 8 to 12-hour days just deep diving into books and to archives and correspondence, looking at different things and connecting different dots. And so it was just a natural fit.
I love it, man. Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, your researching has already hit my bank account because I've picked this book
Oh,
up.
nice.
Oh my goodness,
Nice.
my man. I'm gonna do a book review of this book.
Yeah.
Because you undersold this. I want to tell you, man, you undersold this book. The pictures, the stories, the background. We make up stories. We're like, who do you think this person is? What do you think they did? And such like that. My kids and I. But yeah, this right here was almost worth the price of admission right here, because it was such a. It's so interesting, and it's so interesting.
You know what's interesting about that book?
Go ahead. Me and Virgil actually going to do a little talk about it.
No, y'all should.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that book, it's called A True Likeness, and it's a collection of photos by Richard Samuel Roberts. Now, the thing about that book in particular is that those photos were found, the negatives, the glass plates, in a basement of a home that was about to be demolished. And so, they found it just in the nick of time. And that's not his complete collection. There were a lot more from where that came from. And what we show in the film is that these pictures represent what the decency that existed in the Black community in the South, in a time where we're told that Black people were depressed and sad and oppressed, so on and so forth. But the interesting thing about it is Richard Samuel Roberts, who himself was an entrepreneur, was inspired by the same kind of rhetoric that was coming from Booker T. Washington.
Correct.
Who, in a sense, coined the phrase, cast down your buckets where you are, namely that regardless of what your circumstances are, it's incumbent upon you to be a man, to take responsibility, to be productive, and to take advantage of opportunities that come your way. Richard Samuel Roberts lived in Florida. It was very hot in Florida. His wife was having health issues. And so, he's working as a stevedore. He raised enough money to move to South Carolina, to Columbia, South Carolina, and he worked as a janitor. He bought his house. Notice I said bought, not rent.
Yeah.
He bought his house. He worked as a janitor and was able to raise enough money to open a photo studio. Again, this is indicative of that entrepreneurial spirit set forth first and foremost by the gospel, but also by mouthpieces like Booker T. Washington. Now, I say that to say this: that book that you just showed me, if you open up the intro, who do they pay homage to? Not Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois. So I think it's very strange how these so-called historians, these very left-leaning, God-hating historians, they find a way to take this period of Black decency, of Black excellence. Again, that's the byproduct of Booker T. Washington's teachings. And rather than giving credit to Booker T. Washington, they give it to W.E.B. Du Bois, who was antithetical not only to the entrepreneurial spirit because he decried capitalism, but also the fact that the man was an atheist. He didn't, he hated God. And so again, that just kind of goes to show how you have to be careful about who you get your information from. Now I can actually bypass that intro and go straight to the pictures and read the stories, because, you have to kind of take the meat without the bones
Right.
in a sense. But at the same time, it's interesting how, when it comes to the jobs that we don't want, namely, librarian, art curators, museum workers, historians, researchers, things of that nature, we as people who want the truth have completely surrendered those jobs to people who have an agenda. And the opening of that book is an example of that. I'll say this one last thing before we move on. So our film, Uncle Tom 2,
Yeah.
was released last month,
Hmm.
August 26th. Next month in October, um, there will be a documentary series released by PBS called Making Black America, where we use a lot of the footage that we use in Uncle Tom 2. That footage from that era
Yes.
in the Black South,
Hmm.
that was shot by people like Solomon Sir Jones and others. And they are going to frame what we are showing in Uncle Tom 2 in their own kind of liberal, progressive bent. And
Yeah.
so it's going to be a competing narrative. And so I would challenge people to watch Uncle Tom 2 and watch what PBS is putting out there and decide for yourself who has the facts on their side.
I love it. No, thank you very much for that. And I'll keep my eye out for PBS as well. But I enjoyed what you put out, because one, it actually made me feel like something could be done. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if that's a good way to say it. It felt like, you know what? We really could do something. It's not this woe is me hand wringing, like the sky is falling, the world is coming to an end, but rather like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you know what? We really could, we really have done before as a people, have done better than this, and we can do
Yeah.
better than this. And the movie left, I left from the movie feeling like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done, because you kind of end on a cliffhanger even. And like, there's a lot that needs to be done. But man, like,
Yeah.
if I know what happened in the past, I know how we can get back to that place. So I want to appreciate that. All right, let's look at some of these questions that people had for you. Hey, you're a PCA. How did you become PCA? I know I know you didn't expect that question, but that was the question. How did you become affiliated with the Presbyterian Church of America?
Great question. So there's no, it's not a spectacular story by any means. I was born and raised Church of God in Christ, so Kojic. I don't know
Hmm.
if you're familiar with Church of God in Christ,
I
but
am. I am.
one of the things that kind of stuck out to me growing up in a Kojic church, was while I was able to sense a fear of God from a very early age, and I knew that compared to His holiness, I am a sinner and
Hmm.
I am in need of salvation. I was able to understand that from a very early age. But one of the things that kind of struck me as odd is that my pastor would preach these sermons that would contradict. He would preach this Sunday and it would contradict what he said last Sunday, which would contradict what he said the Sunday before that. And I
Oh
was able
wow.
to kind of pick up on that from a very early age. Um, when I got to around about middle school, high school, um, going to a school where my graduating class was about 800 or 900 um,
Oh, that's a nice size
students.
class. Yeah.
Yeah, so in Mansfield, Texas, where I grew up in Mansfield is a very diverse area in terms of socioeconomic background. You have your rural kind of ag area. You have your
Hmm.
kind of upper middle class country club area. You had just these a variety of different backgrounds, and it was interesting for me growing up in that context, because you were able to kind of see so many different cultures, so many different things going on. I myself indulged in various, you know, um, ideologies, I guess you could say. And then by the time I graduated high school, people like Dr. Vodi Bakum, John MacArthur, and Paul Washer, and others came on my radar. And I was
Hmm.
juxtaposing kind of some of the things that they were preaching up against, pastors that I were familiar with, like Joel Osteen and
Oh
um,
yeah.
Creflo
Oh yeah.
Dollar and others. And so, just trying to kind of make sense of the gospel because, I was born again after high school. I was taking my faith seriously. I was reading the Bible and trying to take heed to what it was I was reading, trying to love the Lord my God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so,
Amen.
whenever, I met my wife, we started going to the Village Church here in Texas. That's
Is
Matt
that
Chandler's church.
that is Matt's? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that is Matt Chandler's
Wow.
church. So we went there for years. He started preaching, particularly as it relates to race relations. Um, he started saying some things that it didn't quite settle right in my spirit, if that makes sense. And I
No, I
couldn't
totally
quite
know
put
what you
my
mean.
finger on what it was at the time. I wasn't like, I didn't know what liberation theology was. Like, I didn't know, um, you know, um, about wokeness and all these different, buzzwords that I know about today. But I knew then that there was something kind of off about some of the things that he was saying with regard, as it relates to race relations and the church's
Hmm.
response. One of the verses that stuck out to me at the time was in Isaiah, where it said, "Do not call conspiracy what these people call conspiracy. Do not
Right.
fear what they fear." And I felt like the church was very, particularly as it related to, Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and some of these things that were happening and kind of the early rise of Black Lives Matter, like it, the church's response to it seemed very hasty to me,
Hmm.
rather than kind of analyzing the situation,
Yes. Come on.
um, and understanding and getting the facts. There was this kind of quickness to jump on a bandwagon and to support these groups and all these different things. And I expected Matt Chandler to take a gospel approach, but instead he took what appeared to me, at least, to be jumping on the bandwagon and supporting pastors who were saying some some not so godly things. So anyway, all that to say, we ended up leaving that church. We went to another church that was smaller, and um, one of the things that kind of struck me as odd with that particular church was it seemed to be very seeker sensitive for where I was at the time.
Hmm.
And I was talking to a friend of mine who was PCA. He was kind of telling me about their church experience and how there's this kind of hyper focus on just the reverence of God, um, and just the way that he explained it was, it sounded like something that was right up my alley. And so we went. When we went there, the first thing I noticed was the median age was very high, if that makes sense. It was
That's my joke too. The median age in my church was extremely high when we joined.
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was very white too, by the way.
Hmm.
And that didn't matter to me one way or the other. Um, but we did feel at home there. Whenever my wife and I went in, we were instantly greeted as if the people have always known us. They were very friendly. They loved God. Many of them were very knowledgeable too
Hmm.
of the scriptures, which was odd to me because all the churches I've ever gone to, there was this kind of general overall ignorance of the scriptures. And
Right.
so anyway, all that to say, it wasn't so much that there was this huge kind of epiphany that came to light. It was more just kind of um, going with the flow and leading where I believe the truth to be leading me,
I love it.
or
Hey,
going with the
thank you.
truth. I mean,
Well,
things.
no, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
We'll have to do a second episode talking about how we came to PCA because my story is kind of similar to yours. But
yeah.
so let's do this. Let's do this. Mary asked, "What kinds of pushback have you received from making these films, Chad? Like, what's been any pushback that you've received?"
Um, so I wouldn't say that we've received a ton of pushback from people who've actually seen it. In fact, I would say that I've seen more people asking questions than rejecting what it is we're saying in the film.
Okay. Okay.
There was a PhD individual who emailed Larry asking questions because of course his understanding of the civil rights movement, his understanding of American history is very steeped in, the run of the mill narrative that we've all been exposed to our
Yeah.
entire lives. And so he was asking questions based on those assumptions. And he had four questions
Hmm.
with, he had a statement followed by four questions followed by a closing. And he shot that email to Larry Elder. Larry Elder then shot it to me. And, I looked at it. He was very cordial in his approach, but he said, admittedly, I'm very leftist on a lot of social issues, and you guys make a very compelling case in this movie. I don't know how to argue it or argue against it rather. But one thing I will, I'll ask these questions of mine because, there are some things that I just want to know. And I would pull the questions up, but they're very long. And
Oh, it's okay.
my answers to his questions were even longer. But whenever he read the questions, he wrote back, like, I literally feel like Chad dropped the mic with his answer to these questions. And I honestly don't know how to rebuff any of what you guys are saying. You guys have made a compelling case, bravo. And so we've seen a lot of that more than, any kind of pushback. I'm not saying that that won't come, but I just haven't seen much of anything yet. And to be fair, that might be because people who are watching Uncle Tom 2, at least at this stage in the process,
Hmm.
are probably fans of part one. You know what I'm
I got
saying?
you.
But one of the things that I will say is that I anticipated a kind of rejection from conservatives uh, um, in the releasing of this film, particularly because we do there's no sacred cows in this movie.
Right.
The civil rights movement in particular is looked at by people from all sides of the political spectrum as a high point for America.
Hmm.
But we don't treat it that way
No.
in this film. And so to the extent that people on the conservative side of the political spectrum agree that the civil rights movement was a high point in America, I personally anticipated that these would be the ones who would say, well, no, it wasn't as bad as people think, as this movie asserts that it is. But I haven't seen any of that yet.
I got you. No, I think that's good. And so if I'm understanding it correctly, it's really more people are kind of like myself, like they have to like, wait, this is a major adjustment to what I've been told, what I've been bought and sold over the last however many years, decades. Like, wait, maybe it wasn't, because, thinking about it, this book, somebody pointed out to me like, hey, I was like, what happened in 100 years? If this is from the 1920s to the 1936, what happened in 100 years to our communities that our communities don't look like this anymore? And
Right.
somebody pointed out and said it was a civil rights movement. And I said, what? And
It
I mean,
was.
I was like, wait, that was going to take some mental exercise. I'm going to have to excise that a little bit because I've been taught. I live in Atlanta, for crying out loud. I went to Morehouse. I mean, we have a statue of MLK on our campus, and the idea that wait, maybe he wasn't, and I knew theologically there was some issues with him, but the idea that maybe it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, right there had like, whoa,
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
But
but
so did you go to seminary?
I did not. Nope. Just
Okay.
no, I have not, no seminary training at all as of
Okay.
yet.
Okay.
But what were you about to say?
No, no. I was just wondering if you did because I didn't either, and I'm just curious as to whether there's any discussion of the social gospel and liberation theology in seminaries. Um, are pastors these days able to kind of distinguish between the differences uh, as it relates to what Martin Luther King stood for, where he was coming from, versus what does the Bible actually teach? It's just something that occurred to me just now.
There's a seminary in the Atlanta University Center. ITC is the name of it, International.
Mhm.
Um, International Theological. I forgot the C stands for. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say no. Liberation theology is a part of that dogma that they're taught there, and and I've seen it. And I remember even when I was in college, taking a course in religion, taking a class in world religions and such. In retrospect, I'm like, wait, y'all was teaching that back then. So, and that was even in vogue in the early '90s and such like that. Now, they probably just outright just teaching James Cone, like
Right.
Saint James Cone. Like, there's probably very little pushback in that regard.
Right.
Now, you mentioned earlier that, you mentioned earlier that you've done a lot of research, tons of research as it relates to these movies and such. So here's a question from Brandon Reform Tosin. What books could you recommend from your research on African American history in America? And I know, because what you even said about Black Wall Street had my jaw hit the floor like, wait, I never thought about that. So do you have a couple of books that you can recommend?
Yeah, of course I do. Um, something in me is debating whether or not I should say what I'm about to say, though, before I answer the question. I'll just say it. So one of the things that I would point out in the question is African American history. Um, the term African American is literally a divisive term, and it was meant to be that. One of the people credit Jesse Jackson for having coined it, but he actually did it with the help of a man named Stokely Carmichael, who later changed his name to Kwame Ture. And we actually play a clip of what Stokely Carmichael said. He said this in the 90s. He said, we wanted to purposefully insert the word African and how Black people identify themselves in America. And the reason for that is if you think you're American, you'll go along with and fight to uphold the values of America.
Yeah.
But if you know you're not an American, you'll fight to destroy capitalist America. And so the whole point in identifying yourself as an African American is kind of a otherization kind of thing that's going on there, where you see yourself as separate or set apart from the national American family. And it's a psychological thing, really. So, I mean, I would encourage people to really kind of look into that and to think about that before you continue using the term African American. I mean, hey, say what you want. I'm not the verb police, but or the grammar police, but
right.
Just something to think about. There are a number of books that I would recommend. One is called The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual. It was written by Harold Cruse, I think in 1971, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, Harold Cruse, Cruse. He writes a lot about a lot of these social justice movements dating as far back as the early 1900s at the turn of the 20th century. He chronicles to what extent did communists play a role in a lot of these social justice movements, these attempts to organize Black intellectuals into groups to rail against the capitalist system. He talks about the NAACP and its leadership. And it's not a kind of like vindictive kind of gotcha kind of book. It's written in a just matter of fact historical kind of chronology. So that's one of those books I recommend. Another one is a book called The Miseducation of the Negro, written by Carter G. Woodson. I don't agree with everything Carter G. Woodson says, but there is a lot of meat in that book. Notably for me, he acknowledges the fact that there exists kind of this thing that goes on in the talented 10th, the upper echelon of Black intellectualism, where these black students are going to these Ivy League schools. They're going to Yale, they're going to Harvard, and all the rest. And he says that they're being taught by professors who have never had any involvement at all in business. Yet these professors call themselves trying to teach these Negro students about business. And what they're telling these Negro students is that there's no way in a white-dominated capitalist society that Negroes can mobilize upward. And says Carter G. Woodson, these intellectual Negroes are being encouraged to fall into the ranks of what is known as communism. But one of the things that Carter G. Woodson observes is that the Southern uneducated Negroes are actually at work doing the very thing that these miseducated Northern Negroes are being taught cannot be done. So that's a very a peculiar observation as far as I'm concerned.
Good catch.
So yeah,
I like it.
miseducation of the Negro. Geez, what else? There is a book called My Larger Education by Booker T. Washington. Of course, there's Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington. There's a lot of books. And in fact, Jason, I'll email you or text you all the books that that's a good one. I'll text you all of the books that I myself have read in the researching for Uncle Tom too.
I love it. And I will put that in the
we were
description
planning on
for
putting
sure.
a reference page on our website so people can see for themselves.
Well, let me thank you very much. And I'm sure that the audience will appreciate it. Brandy says, I'm going to need a real bookcase soon. I'm telling you, if you watch that movie, you will go to IKEA, go ahead and order it on Amazon, get your new bookcase. It's coming. And Q said, y'all got me making another book list. Q does a lot of my book reviews with me, or at least reads books with me, and we bat ideas back and forth. So she's a great resource. But
I can't go on without mentioning this too. Race and Culture by Thomas Sowell. You probably already read it, but that's one I highly recommend. Black Rednecks, White Liberal, another one by Thomas Sowell. Anything about Thomas Sowell, really. And so, and that's a problem that we in the church ought to be looking at. Are we setting forth a good example of what a biblical marriage is, what biblical manhood is, what biblical womanhood is, and imparting that to our children? Or are our children getting their expectations from what they're seeing on TikTok and what they're hearing in songs and when watching on television?